Please, Rabbi Chaim.
Okay, I wanted to. It's something new I thought about when I read from the Torah this week. I wanted to show that there is an idea which is not an original idea. We read in the Haggadah the following. We read in the Haggadah something which is from the Torah. It says in the Haggadah from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4, verse 34. Has any God ever tried to take for himself one nation out from another nation, with trials, signs, wonders, and war, with a strong hand, outstretched arm, and with great fearsome acts, like everything like the Lord your God, that God your Lord did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? And this expression, לקחת לו גוי מקרב גוי, that it's like one that one nation is taken, that the Israelites were taken out from Egypt, from the midst of Egypt. How could that even happen? How could such a miracle even take place? It's something quite incredible. And Chazal say to this expression that this is like Ka'adam sheshomet et ha'ubar mimei hapara. It's like a man who helps a birth of a calf from the cow's womb. ויוציא אותם מכור הברזל. Now in this way, he takes that God helps us to, like the birth from the Egyptian empire, which is the womb of Egypt. And we have this picture of the birth, we say the birth of a nation. We have this picture also of the birth in the blood which we put on the that the Israelites have to put on the doorposts before, which is the origin of the mezuzot, and also then afterwards, as 7 days afterwards, when they go through the sea for Kriyat Yam Suf, that is also they go through the birth. It can be the water which is going, or again it can be the womb, and from out of the womb comes the birth of the nation. The Israelite people come out, and this is again the picture of the birth. Now that's all fine, and it's been said before, but I want to say something more than that, which is something connected to what we read, and it again shows you the connection between the reason for the mitzvot, at least can be a reason for mitzvot, and what we read in and the story of the Exodus, and a textual problem. We read last week in the Torah something which is very difficult to understand. It talks about a woman who has given birth. It says the following: "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a woman has conceived seed, has given birth, and born a male, then she shall be unclean 7 days, and as in the days of her menstrual, as she has a menstruation, she should be unclean. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, and then she shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 33 more days, and then she shall touch nothing which is holy, and she shall not come to the sanctuary until the days of her purifying are fulfilled. That's the story of the Torah. Now, there are several questions here, but what do we have here? We have a period of 7 days, then we have which is the period of not being of her tum'ah after the birth of like she's like a nida, like somebody who has a menstrual period of 7 days, and then there's a period of 33 days afterwards. All in all, where the blood is pure, but she can't go to the sanctuary. After the 40 days, she can go to the sanctuary. That's the story in the Torah. Those are the rules. And so, first of all, that's why 7 days, why 33 days? And in the midst, suddenly it says that we have a Brit Milah. Suddenly the rules of Brit Milah, which has nothing to do with anything. Why does that come in the middle of this? So I have a following suggestion. I have to be short because we have to hear everybody. So the following suggestion. There is a Zohar, which is interesting, which talks about that the 7 weeks of counting the Omer, which we start to count in the second day of Pesach, until Shavuot, that these 7 weeks are like the 7 days of Shiva Yemei Nikim. They're like the 7 days of the menstrual period. Let's just say it for the sake of that. The 7 days of the menstrual period, and then comes Matan Torah after that. The 7 days and 7 weeks, and it's the same for the sake of the argument. So the Zohar has this comparison. So the 7 weeks, 7 days, and then it's in order that we can come and receive the Torah on the 50th day in a clean way. We're all impure for 7 weeks, and then we can receive the Torah. This is the picture in the Zohar. If we take this picture and translate it now to what we have here, then we have something which is, I think, really beautiful. We have 7 days, a woman gives birth, she has 7 days first which she is impure, and then that is like the 7 weeks of Sfirat Omer. And then comes the Brit, like the 7 weeks of Sfirat Omer, of counting the Omer. Then we have the 8th day. The 8th day, what happens on the 8th day? It's like after the 7 weeks of counting the Omer, we have Matan Torah, we receive the Torah, we have the Brit between God and humankind. The 8th day is the Brit. The 8th day we have the Brit Milah. That therefore it comes here. It's natural, and then that it comes here. It solves the textual problem. Then we have the 40 days, the 7 days, and the 33 days. We have the 40 days. The 40 days are like the 40. What do we have? 40. The 40 years of going in the wilderness. The 40 days of going in the wilderness. Those were the 40 years when Bnei Israel were going in the wilderness. What happened after the 40 years? They came to the land. The holy land. They came to the land, built the Mikdash. They came to the holiness. Like after the woman comes after the 40 days, comes to the holiness, she can go to the Mikdash, she brings an offering, can come to the Mikdash, like that comes to the Mikdash. So what do we see? We see a constant parallel. The birth, the Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus, the comparison of the birth, the Exodus, and the laws of giving birth, which are here compared to the birth of the Jewish people, and how everything then turns in and comes in beautifully together, and how then you can give an explanation which is an explanation which then ties us very closely to the Almighty. The Almighty is the one who gives us the birth, who gives birth to the Jewish people, and we are then born out of this closeness to the Almighty, and have the great and have then gratitude to the Almighty who gives us birth uh, on Pesach, and then the full birth then comes when we come to Shavuot. Thank you.
Thank you, Rav Michael. Just to see the smile and the glint in your eyes of the enjoyment of your teaching Torah is refreshing, and it shows the hitchadshut. We talked so much in this last week of how the month of Nisan is directly correlated to the renewal, and it's actually the first mitzvah that we were given, Am Yisrael was given, is to renew ourselves through the new moon and Pesach coming through that. So to constantly find new things in the Torah and to base yourself and to learn more and to see the twinkle in the eyes of learning the Torah. Thank you, Rav Michael, for sharing. Rav Meir with the Mem, bevakasha.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Because you all got freeze. I don't. Okay. Thank you, Rav Michael. I would like to tell you a story. 30 years ago, this year, 30 years ago, I went to the former Soviet Union. It was very fresh being the former Soviet Union. It had just fallen apart. It was a new situation. I went together with a Danish young friend living here in Israel, still living here, Yigal Felt, and we went together to a place called Samara. 18 hours with train from Moscow, near the Volga River, and we were there for 5 weeks, including Pesach Eve. And I was happy that my family that remained in Israel, they were together with Rav Michael and his family for Seder, which was nice and good for them and for me. Anyhow, we went there, and they were newly organized, or not organized rather, communities there in it was all new. And we came there and we taught Hebrew, we taught Judaism, we taught about Israel, we met people every day. And the highlight sort of that, or our being there, apart from a few other things, was a Leil Seder, which people could sign for coming to this Leil Seder, and meat, kosher meat, of course, was, apart from matzot, was sent from Israel for this evening. I'm afraid that meat was stolen. We never got it, somewhere on the way. And me, my friend, we had to arrange cooking fish and all kinds of, a long story and a nice story. And anyhow, I came to that Seder evening with a lot of people and with children. And children, we had arranged that they should sing and they should speak and they should all kinds of things. And I had to shorten, of course, Haggadah, and I spoke in English and Yiddish, and it translated into Russian, and so on and so forth. And it was very intensive evening of arranging this and make it work out that evening. It did work out. I think I have a feeling that it was quite nice. And we finished that evening, and I came back to a little flat where we lived, and it was already late that evening. And I sat down, and all of a sudden I asked myself, did I really eat matzah? did I perform the mitzvah of eating matzah? And I wasn't sure. So I took a parcel of matzot that we, of course had there, and I washed my hands and yadayim, and I said the bracha achilat matzah, motzi lechem haaretz, and I ate the matzot, the kezait, and other kezait, the third kezait of matzah, and of course afterwards I had to bench. I was already after the Seder itself, and that was very interesting. The feeling of performing the mitzvah of eating matzah by itself. That's what I had to do, and I will never forget that. You know, my friends, we don't have any mitzvah where we eat something that the Torah commands us, or we don't eat any sacrifices anymore. We don't eat anything that the Torah commands us to eat, not even maror and other things. But matzah is the only one once a year, and the feeling I had there, far away in the depth of Russia, to perform the mitzvah it was a great feeling. Now, why do I tell you all this? Because I think we have two paths on the Seder evening. We have, of course, the mitzvah of telling the story. That's cool. It's here. And we try to involve the children in this, and we try to have them being awake during this evening. And we do all types of gimmicks in order to keep them awake, that they should be a part of the story. But we shouldn't forget that we have also the part of performing mitzvot, the Rabbanan, and mitzvah the Oraita, eating matzah. And you know, by that I will end. There is a part in our sources in the Tosefta saying in Hebrew, chotfin et hamatzah. You grab the matzah, and Rambam understands this as a kind of a game similar to what many of us do, the afikoman, that the children take it, or the father takes it, and then you have to get it back, and all that, and then keeps the children awake, and so on. But another learned rabbi in the Middle Ages, Avraham ben David, he says you shouldn't understand that expression that way. That is, the expression is chotfin et hamatzah. You sort of grab, you take the matzah, and he said you should understand it as to get fastly to the matzah, that is to the meal. Don't wait to chotfin el hamatzot. Don't make the story too long. It's good to speak along. So he, and perhaps the Rashbam, says that after the meal, you could talk more then. You shouldn't talk too little, but you should remember. And then he says, in order that the children should be awake, not for the story only, but to be a part of performing the mitzvah. And that is, I think that's a second important matter that we have on Leila Seder. I don't know how you have, I have this being silenced when everyone has washed his hands, and we usually don't speak after Netilat Yadayim. That's this once a year silence when everyone sits down, and then all of a sudden they all eat this matzah, perform this mitzvah Shem Doraita. Then, of course, according to what we have studied and learned for quite a few months now, can try and think about the idea of this mitzvah. I remember there in Asher what I thought about, but perhaps you could put all kinds of ideas and reasons for this mitzvah. But let us remember that we are performing a practical mitzvah of eating the matzah, and that we should do, and also try to get the next generation, the young children, within this mitzvah, apart from the great and wonderful mitzvah of telling the story of the Exodus. Thank you very much for listening, and Chag Kasher Sameach.
Thank you very much, Rav Meir. And in these days, of course, everyone has thoughts about, you're telling a story from the Soviet Union and the times that were, and Russian Jewry, and the effect on both sides that Jews are having, and the prayers that we all have going into this Leila Seder for all of them, of course, as well. And this idea of shortening or not shortening, but making sure that we don't forget the actual mitzvot with all of the surroundings is very important. Rav Shmuel, would you like to share with us, please?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the beautiful Divrei Torah. Yeah, this year I've been involved with the school here in Helsinki a lot, and teaching there. And when you teach youngsters, teenagers, you think of different things, and you maybe look at the Seder and at Pesach from a bit of a different perspective than maybe yourself, especially still youngsters who maybe have less Jewish practice at home. So one thing that often we try in the curriculum, we try to find comparisons between something in Judaism and something in their life that they have every day or that they discuss in other subjects. So very often when you speak about Pesach, you start talking about other people nowadays. Maybe there are some forms of slavery or oppression in other countries and in other places. And it's a nice way, really. It's a nice approach. But at the same time, for me, I was asked to be personal. Everybody was supposed to give personal ideas. To me personally, Pesach is in a way, quite nationalistic. It's really about the Jewish people. The Jewish people was born when we left Egypt. Everything before that is kind of like a prehistory of the Jewish nation. We have Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, a certain type of family. Perhaps some people followed Abraham, but the nation, the Jewish nation, which is still here today, that was born by Yetziat Mitzrayim. And that's really, if you think about it, a big theme in the Haggadah. But there's one piece in the Haggadah which perhaps is not the first piece that people pay attention to. Usually, we have Manishtana, the 4 questions, which is very exciting because it's the youngest of the family and the children sing, and it's very nice. Then maybe we tell quick Avadim Mayun leFaro b'Mitzrayim, we're slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. Then there are a few obscure paragraphs about the rabbis of the Talmud who are discussing the whole night, and when they woke up in the morning, when the morning came, the students came, that we are still talking, Shachrit is coming. Then there's the 4 sons, which is obviously very popular. But then just after that, there's a paragraph, very interesting paragraph, which says, Mitchila ovdei avodah zara hayu avoteinu. In the beginning, our ancestors were idol worshippers. ועכשיו קרבנו המקום לעבודתו. And now, the Makom, omnipresent, the one who is everywhere, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, has brought us to his service. And I just thought this is a very interesting sentence. First of all, what's it doing in the Haggadah? What's it doing there? What are we referring to? In the beginning, our ancestors were idol worshippers, and it continues. It tells us that our ancestors was Abraham, his father was Terach. Terach was an idol worshipper. Some of you might have learned as a kid the story of how Abraham's father had the shop with idols, and how Abraham breaks the idols and realizes there is only one God. And so it's very interesting. But what's it got to do with Leila Seder? And by the way, this is not just a nice thing some rabbi at some point added to the Haggadah. This is actually something the Talmud tells us. The Mishnah tells us, the Talmud tells us, you're supposed to be matchil bignut, you're supposed to start with negative things that happened and go on to the positive things and praise God on Seder night. And according to one opinion, this is what you're meant to start with. You're meant to talk about Terach, who was Abraham's father. And first of all, it's very surprising that we should talk about that. And also, the continuation is very interesting. And now Hashem has brought us to his service. Yeah? It's interesting because Abraham himself, it seems to be from the Midrashim and so on, he didn't actually start by God bringing him to anything. According to the Midrash, he actually realized that there's a sun, there are stars, there's a moon, there must be somebody who's over all of this, who's above it, and there must be one God who rules everything. So this line that now he has brought us to his service is very interesting. And so I looked a bit at the commentaries. There is an idea that in the middle of all this story of Pesach, which is really, like I said, in a way, it's a patriotic. I don't know if nationalistic patriotic are the right words, because we're not talking about the similar type of nationhood as other countries, but we're talking about the Jewish people and its birth. At the same time, it's very important that you don't go, it doesn't become a reason for pride, thinking that we are a better nation, better than the others. And the Haggadah actually stresses it. Actually, our ancestors were idol worshippers. Of the Avodah Zarah, Avodeinu. And it's interesting, if you look at other sources, the prophet Yechezkel speaks about it. Not only was Abraham's father an idol worshipper, actually in Egypt, which is 400 years later, the Jews also, many of them engaged in idol worship. We see later in the Haggadah, actually it says that we were devoid of mitzvot. Hashem gave us some mitzvot, gave us mitzvah of Pesach, mitzvah of Milah. We're not so amazing. We're not tzaddikim. So I think this nekuda, this point is very interesting. That the Jewish perspective on being proud of being part of this special nation and being God's chosen people is never an ideology of we're better than the others. It's really an ideology of Hashem has chosen us. Hashem decided, because the promise he made to Abraham many centuries earlier, he's brought us to his service. He wants us to do his service in the way that he has commanded. And that is really, I think, a very interesting, very important message for Pesach, because if you think about it, these two things, the Exodus from Egypt culminating in, the slavery in Egypt culminating in the Exodus from Egypt, and the other side of the story, the beginning being once idol worshippers and coming to the redemption of serving only one God and following his mitzvot. These are two themes, two stories, both stories of freedom. One is a spiritual, one is a physical freedom. But this, the point in these freedoms is not just for ourselves, or so that we can show that we're better than others, but actually God has chosen us for a specific mission, which is meant to be an example for others. And the freedom that we're trying to bring and the message of freedom is really a very universal concept.
Thank you very much, Rav Shmuel. Bringing so many sources into this idea, which you bring is what Pesach means for you, which is one of the main ideas in Pesach itself, is that we have to, what does Pesach mean for me? As we prepare and as we clean the house and as we make sure there's no chametz, it's an opportunity to ask ourselves, well, what does Pesach mean for me? What does freedom mean for me? What does being a part of Am Yisrael mean for me? All of these questions are hanging there as we take the shmat in our hand and get on our knees and clean the chametz. Rav Yair, bevakasha.
Yeah, it's very hard to come after so many important and clever rabbis. I think I will. I was almost jealous to hear the story of Rav Meir, and it reminds me of something that is kind of a conflict for me, and that I think that can be connected to Pesach. I grew up with my father and Rav Meir, just as he told the story of the Jews of Soviet Jewry. I grew up in a generation who had huge fights to fight for, both the fight for the rescue of the Soviet Jewry, the fight to establish the state of Israel. They were born into the fact that the state was created, but how it will form and that it will stay, that was a huge, really a huge fight. When I go the generation back, talking about what my grandfather and great-grandfather experienced with the First World War, the Second World War, Holocaust, for us as Danish Jews, the rescue of the Danish Jewry. And I think of my life and what did I experience? And yes, we have different events, and the situation today is alarming and demands action, but it's not the big ideologies who fought the same way, and the risks are not as big. They are for some experience right now, but as a general for the Jews of the world, and with a different perspective. And I think of the Pesach story, and I feel exactly that. That in so many ways, the Pesach story is the way we try to feel and experience amazing things, great events that we haven't experienced. This is the very essence of all when we constantly say about Yetziat Mitzrayim, about we haven't experienced these things, and we can't even. It's hard to relate to. I can only be jealous that the stories I heard of the fights of the previous generations. I grew up on reading them and being inspired, but I don't have the same fight to fight for. And so for me, in that way, that's a challenge that is the same challenge as experience Pesach. How do you get these stories and make them relevant and find and bind them into your life in a way that is not only, wow, what a great thing they experienced, but how do I experience them? And I think a part of it is different things that you talked about. One part of it for me is all the aspect of preparation. We just read the Parashat HaChodesh, Shabbat in the synagogue, and everyone are very. There are two things that when everyone read them, everyone looks on the first part, HaChodesh Lechem, like you spoke before, Rav Moshe David, about the Hitchadshut and the Rosh Chodesh, and about the blood and the Korban Pesach. And everyone forgets one date that is in the middle, where it says that in the 10th of the month, they're supposed to take a lamb. Now, no one ever talks about that 10th of the month. What about why is it mentioned exactly the date when it's supposed to be? And first of all, there's a similarity to Chodesh Tishrei, but that's something to a different, how you have both Aleph Nisan, Yud Ben Nisan, and Tetvav Nisan. Yudalet Ba'erev, and the same thing as Tishrei. But for me, the part that I think I also felt what Pesach was for me, and we asked for personal stories and not only like a theoretical idea of Pesach. Pesach is definitely the preparations to Pesach. We were forced as children to take responsibilities at home. I have to be careful because my father sits here today, and it's always good to be careful in Kvodei Avayim. But there were lots of tasks that we had to do for Pesach, not only cleaning our own rooms, and really, I remember washing the Lego in the washing machine, and go through all the toys, and especially I almost always had the task of cleaning all the books. And my father is a person who loves books, so we had a lot of them. So we had to take all the bookshelves outside to the out of the porch, and bang them to clean them from. I'm not sure they were open between Pesach, one Pesach to the other. So I'm not sure which chametz was supposed to be found in all the books, but it was at least it was a good time to clean the dust from them. And we had a tendency in Israel, the recent years, many rabbis talked all the time about how chametz, avak ze lo chametz, and you're not supposed to, you don't really need to clean all the house from dust before Pesach. For that, you also have a bitul chametz in the worst scenario that you had some crumbs left somewhere. You do bitul chametz. It's not the meaning behind it wasn't that we have to go crazy to really find every crumb hidden in every pocket. But still, there's something about the preparation that I miss. I think this is the preparation, going to the 10th of Nisan, that it starts from a chodesh hazeh lachem. Starts think about it in early stage. Do things about it. Prepare yourself all the time. It creates a much better experience. One of the things I learned in recent years, we are so many times in our life we try to make surprises. Like we want to surprise our partner in life or friends, and do something amazing that they will be surprised. Gather all the friends and bring them in, and then suddenly we'll do a surprise party. It will be an amazing experience. But when we do that, we actually miss, 80% of the fun, which is getting prepared to something. And when we make a trip or when you do something, getting prepared to it, getting excited, try to read about it, prepare, look on all the aspects, is part of creating an amazing event. The preparation is not something that makes that when we come there, we won't have power anymore, we won't have a koach to experience. The opposite. It's part of creating this event. So I hope, and that's the reason I wanted to say today, we still have a week and a half until Pesach. So people, there's still time to prepare. There's still time to have Pesach experience, not only the last second, not only the last day before, but do something every day and involve the children and give them tasks, even though it's not necessarily halachically. There's something about the preparation that we need that makes a much, for me, a much deeper meaning for the day itself. And definitely I can say personally, and also that is another, maybe the last thing to learn, that people actually react many different ways. We talked among our brothers, the boys of the Melchior family, about Leila Seder. And it's very interesting to see that we had the very different views about this night and how much we like it or not. We all experienced the same Seder evening at my parents'. But for me, it was the highlight of the year. Leila Seder until today is my favorite holiday. There's a good fight with Yom Kippur that I also really like, but Leila Seder, with no doubt for me, is the highlight of the year. And the highlight of the Jewish year, but also the highlight of all the year. But some of my brothers didn't experience the same thing, which reminds me of again, the idea that when I say how much I like the preparation and that is part of creating this, some of our children might do it otherwise. And we should think of how Pesach will fit to each and one of us, how there will be a place in a different way. And I wish for you, I really wish for you that your Pesach will be 50% as exciting and amazing that it was for me in my parents' home. That is what created my Jewish identity. So I hope that this is something that you can have wherever you do, in whatever form you create to your Pesach. Yes,
thank you.
That was what I.
Thank you very much, Rav Yair. I'd like to try to pick up on some of these beautiful thoughts that we've heard this evening from the Rabbanim and conclude this evening. And a question I would like to ask is a very simple question. In other words, as we've heard this evening, it's so important to that the Seder evening be something personal, that you tell the story, that you tell the story as if it is your own story. But when we're reading the Haggadah, where is it that we tell our story? In other words, we start the Haggadah, we start the part of Magid, which is the telling the story, and then very fast we get into these calculations of how many punishment and how many makot were there, and reading the different psukim and reading from the prophets and reading, and many times we get caught up in that, and you ask yourself a very simple question: where is my story in this? And it reminds me of a book that I once read which was on storytelling, and it brought the story of there was a dispute between Native Americans and the U.S. government over a piece of land, and whether it belonged as part of the land reserve of the Native Americans. And the chief comes there and steps up very furious into the conversation. He doesn't even understand who these white people are that are showing up and taking the land, and they're translating for him. And then eventually he says, if this is your land, where are your stories? And I think it's a very strong sentence. If this is your land, where are your stories? Because part of the belonging and identity of who we are is to have a shared narrative that we belong to. And a shared narrative can be very different and have very different parts and have the different Melchior children sitting around, but they're part of a story that they can all relate to, and that is the story. It's not about fact, it is about how I experience the story itself. And as strict as we are in Pesach about all of the rules and all of the preparations that we've gone through to get there, at the end of the day, those who lead the Seder night are the children, who are the ones who are even not the most knowledgeable, but they are the ones who understand what stories mean. We put our kids to sleep at night with stories, because stories at a certain level take us even higher than the level of the knowledge itself. Because stories bring us into where am I a part of this. I remember in my parents' own Seder for many years, we had the merit relating to Rav Meir's story, that we had this very old Yid, old Jew, who was a refusnik back in the days. And he went through, even before then, I think he went through, under the Soviet regime, he went through horrific torture, and he ended up making it. And my father, just as we began the Seder after the Man Shnana, he would stop the Seder night and he would say, please tell us your story. And you can say, well, this isn't a story about the Soviet Jews and about the Soviet regime, but it is, because that implanted in me to listen to a personal story of redemption for a person and the hardships that he went through as a slave, leaving that and really feeling the redemption of the night through that. So it wasn't in the text of the Haggadah to say so, and it wouldn't be right to tell my children maybe that person's story, because I have to tell them my story and they have to tell me their story as well. So when we read in the Haggadah and it says that the Talmidim were and the Chachamim were sitting around and telling stories all night, it doesn't say that they were reading Psukim. It doesn't say that they were reading the Tanakh. It says they were telling the stories. And now how I imagine that is that they're each just going around in a circle and each of them sharing, what does that mean for me? And bringing a personal anecdote from their own life to say, this is how I understand it. This is what it means to me. This is something that happened to me in the last year that can be this is what I need to work on in order to be free. This is what I need to, this is what will bring me closer to my own redemption or closer to my people. And in doing so, they did that throughout the night until it became so late that someone had to say, it's already morning. And maybe that relates back to Rav Meir. They had to start asking themselves whether they ate the matzah or not, because they were so in the story itself. And they were doing that most important mitzvah. I was also thinking this year I will have a new experience that I haven't had before. We had in one of our shiurim of halacha, we discussed the issue of minhag. And I think Seder night really brings, for those who are maybe coming from the outside, some confusion, because if you're just reading a book, it says, well, some do this and some do this and some do this and some do that, and you haven't seen the Seder yourself, or maybe you've seen a few of them, then what do I do and how do I do it right? So this confusion actually goes all the way back to the Mishnah, in which the Mishnah in Pesachim already discusses about whether that apparently there were some who were eating a fried lamb, roasted, thank you, Rav Shmuel, roasted lamb, dafka, to remind themselves of the korban. And others were saying that is forbidden because you can't roast the lamb because that is something special that is being done. And that this difference of opinion went down all the way down from there throughout the generations. And slowly, almost all Jews stopped eating roasted lamb. The only ones who were left doing this were those who were maybe a bit separated from the others, the Yemenite Jews, who have a very close tradition to specifically follow the traditions of the temple as much as they can. And they never, and they were a bit cut off from the rest. So it's fascinating to see that they keep traditions that others have not. In some ways, we had the privilege of learning traditions from the Ethiopian Jews. Those who came from Ethiopia had their special traditions as well. And in general, these were very tribal nations who were very close to storytelling. Storytelling is a very strong element in tribal traditions, so as it was in the Jewish tradition. So this year, so the Yemenite Jews until these days are the last ones, as far as I know, who still eat roasted lamb on Seder night. And for this year is the first time that we will be joining the Yemenite Seder of my wife's family, and they will have roasted lamb on the table, something specifically that I know that it says that we should not. So it's the beauty of the stories that you have different customs, and that you have, and they have a very soft matzah, which they wrap around the roasted lamb like a shawarma, and that's how they eat Pesach night which is quite nice. They don't break any teeth and they don't have to have dental fillings afterwards like some of us do. So in that sense, I think the beauty comes that each and every person has their custom and has their tradition and has their own story. And the challenge of this night, maybe connecting to Rav Yair and what he said at the end, is to prepare, even within the preparation themselves, to ask yourself, where am I right now? Where am I in my life? What is there that I need to, how am I going to leave my own confines of Egypt myself? What am I lacking in my belief in order to do so? In order to just leave everything that I know for so long that I need to leave behind? What is the story that I'm going to tell myself? What is the story that I will tell my children about myself, my Jewish identity, our Jewish identity? How am I connecting to the nation as a people? How do I step out of my own confines and reach out? And this year specifically, there's so much to daven for, to pray for, so many Jews who are in need, and that we have this idea of Pesach that Kimcha de Pischa, that there's a special time of caring for the needy just before Pesach to make sure that every Jew has what he needs. And this is carried out until this time, and definitely it's a time as well to do so now, to reach out in any way that you can to so many who are in need, and also that we ourselves take ourselves out of Egypt, prepare ourselves so that we can sit there and enjoy. It's very interesting how matzah on the one hand is like the poorest bread, but that simplicity is so beautiful that it's actually the richest experience that we can have, to sit back, to lean back, to enjoy the simplicity of what we have, what God has given us in life, and all of that together to really feel that we have a renewal, that we're leaving whatever we needed to leave it behind, and to continue our story. And our children are the best, if we have the merit of having children, are the best storytellers to sit there and to tell us the stories. Remind us also that not all questions need to be answered. We actually don't answer their questions. We just leave them open and we tell them a story. Maybe we sometimes need to do that for ourselves as well, that we have so many questions that are not answered, but that's okay, because we have our story. And as long as we have our story, we have our land, and Bezrat Hashem, we will go from this redemption to the full redemption, and believe in that all that is happening in the world is for the best and bringing us to better days for us, for Am Yisrael, and for the whole world. So I'm very glad that those here could take this evening and spend it with us. And I'd like to thank the Rabbanim who took this time in these very busy times of preparation for Pesach and everything, to share Torah with us as a preparation for Pesach. And we will also send out an email with further information about the next semester, which will begin Bezrat Hashem after Pesach, and you will get the information on that. I'd like to wish everyone, there's, some people say Pesach kasher v'sameach, that we want to make sure it's kosher and happy. I would say the opposite, Pesach sameach v'kasher, that we don't get, with all of the details of making sure everything is kosher, we don't forget the simcha, the happiness as well. Both are so important. So Pesach sameach v'kasher.
Moshe David, I just want to
Yes.
say that we have at least a few Wednesdays now, also after Pesach, with the Yom HaShoah, with the Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut. So it might be a longer time. So it's not immediately after Pesach.
Yes, that's why we're actually going to set the schedule, and you will all, thank you, Rav Yair. You will get the exact schedule as soon as we put it together, because it's a bit complicated with all of this. But if you miss us on a Wednesday, you can always go and find the recording and listen to a shiur that perhaps you missed, or just want to hear again. It's always good, V'shinantam levanecha, to always repeat and learn over and over again.
But hopefully we'll participate in all the events and all the things that we have in the different communities.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. Pesach Sameach v'Kasher, Pesach Kasher v'Sameach to you all.
חג שמח.
חג שמח.
חג שמח.
חג שמח.
חג שמח, פסח שמח.
תודה.
חג שמח.
אנחנו נשארים עכשיו?
חג שמח, אנחנו נשארים, כן. מי שפה, יש לו זכות להחליט.
יכול להתחיל ל-waiting room. משה דוד?
כן, אני עושה את זה. אני עושה את זה. חג שמח, ברברה, להתראות. See you.
אתה יכול לעצור את ההקלטה אבל.